All right, so far in the last videos, kind of walk through like the mentality of like building out an application like this. I went through kind of how you can visualize the end state to help you build more effectively and not burn tokens as much. And now we're going to go a little bit into like the structuring your document. And so how I structure it, and I've written a few of these, is I structure it almost. First, here's the initial prompt that I wrote off screen. In reality, we wanted to give it context of what we're trying to build, because sometimes it will have opinions, and either you can correct those opinions, but at the earliest stages, when you're just building like an MVP that you're either building for yourself internally or you're building for early customers that have expressed an interest, and you're not ready to go out and hire an engineer, you're not ready to raise, you're just really trying to feel out what this will look like. I usually start with an initial prompt. Some people go really big with their initial prompt. I do not do that. I think it burns too many tokens. I think especially in Bolt, it provides larger gaps between rolling things back. So a lot of times in the Bolt Discord, you'll see a lot of people who will have issues that they can't figure out where the issue was, and it's because it usually means, generally speaking, that their prompts were too long, and therefore when they roll it back, they might roll back 3 or 4 features they're not planning on, and also they're burning tokens as they do it. So another thing that they complain about is, or that I've seen like as an error, is that they will not understand, like, if they change one thing, it'll change something else in Bolt, which will go through my formula of how I do prompting in the chat interface. But at the initial stage, I always write these documents out. It comes from just in building companies and helping other people build companies. It's always helpful to have some type of memo, some type of thought exercise, so that you can plan out what you want to do, so that when things change, you know exactly what needs to change. And you're not changing too many variables at once. You're just changing one variable. And so at the bottom here, I put the initial prompt so that Bolt has an idea of what we're trying to build. They know that it needs to be simplicity, but on the back end, it's going to be extremely complex. And so it needs to support that simplicity from a hiring manager specifically, because Bolt will have some type of like opinions on how that should be built. And then it also says what pages it's going to need. Now, you can always add pages later, but I usually like to map out. I know that I'm going to need a dashboard. I know I'm going to need open positions for people to upload the job descriptions. I know I'm going to need candidates so that I can easily figure out which candidates have applied to which jobs. I know that I'm going to need references for the references to be able to connect them to the candidates, which will also be connected to the open positions. And I know I'm going to need user profile, and I'm also going to need a sub page of billing. And the reason it's a sub page is because typically, if you're selling something to a hiring organization or a larger organization, you have to understand there's going to be different hiring managers, and so there's going to need to be an organizational billing owner that can also split out different user profiles. So the sub page is going to be billing, and then eventually we'll probably have an organizational page as well as a sub page to the user profile. So what I typically do is I use shortcuts, and I'll start building these out, and I build them out one by one. It's a little bit more tactile that way. Candidates. And this is going to get really tedious for some people, but this is just what I found is just the best way to do it. User profiles. And then I'll go up and I'll do in A2, I'll do dashboard V1. And then I'll just go down the list. So I'm going to pause this real quick so that you don't have to see this stuff, because it's going to take a while. Okay, so I filled in some of those. One thing that I did not fill in, that I did not tell you about, is that sometimes when you know you're going to have something super complex, you might have, like, if you have different if different types of users are going to have different access to different features or different values, then, or even different experiences, if you're creating a marketplace, I would honestly keep user profiles and user management separate, because your user management is going to require a host of different things like billing, like relational things if they want to combine user accounts or split them apart or things like that. Chats, DMs, security, notifications, all that stuff is going to be usually tied to like user management, which will have something to do with user profiles, but you're going to need to build out a completely different like feature set for user management. For this application, I'm going to make it super simple at the front end because we're just testing this out with a couple people before we're going to try and like launch it into an actual thing. And so that is a good way to I'll do the dashboard real quick and I'll talk through what I'm thinking of here. So if I'm a hiring manager, I've hired people before, so this is kind of helpful to have some type of background into what you're building. So if I'm a hiring manager, I want to know in my dashboard, I want to be able to open it and see how many references we have outstanding. I'm going to do this a little simply. I wouldn't do this if I was building out a thing, but because I would have all this information in my head. So how many references outstanding? How many open jobs? How many candidates have received references in the past? Probably do 48 hours because that'll be helpful as a hiring manager. You would also want to know how many jobs, how many candidates have received references in the past 48 hours. Position candidates. How many candidates are in the current workflow? So this is the dashboard that people would normally have. So I'll go through this really quickly and then I'll write the user stories of how I would like prompt Bolt. So again, you're giving Bolt this first, and then after it builds out the application for you, then you're going to go in and say when a user is. You can usually type this via what's it called? Just like natural language processing is how a lot of these AI applications are built. So you can just kind of type in different ways. So you can say when a user is looking, when a user lands on, when a user is on, things like that. I'll say when a user is looking at the dashboard page, the user should see how many references outstanding, how many open jobs there are, how many candidates have received references in the past 48 hours, and how many candidates are in the current pipeline. Okay, so the reason why you want to phrase this way is because you're basically giving Bolt like parameters of what you would like to see. You're going to need to connect all of these down through here. So you have to, it's much easier to start building out the skeleton for this application as you're going through all of the pages so that you know what to attach. I call it, you got to close the loop. So every single one of these things we'll have to close the loop on. So like for instance, when it says the user should see how many references are outstanding. Well, later on, when you do the references V1, you need to say essentially like on the application should keep track of which references are outstanding for a candidate and which ones have been received. So when you give Bolt this, and we'll go like as we continue through this building process, you'll see. So essentially what we're trying to tell Bolt here is that there needs to be a difference between outstanding and ones that have been received, because otherwise you would never get this part of the dashboard. And this part is going to be really helpful because if you have 5 candidates and each one needs 3 references, You need to be able to easily see, okay, which of my five candidates are missing one or more references. And so when I type in, the user should see how many references are outstanding, that number is going to be something that they can click into. So below you should say, when the user clicks on the card that displays how many references are outstanding, a modal should pop up or open, either way, that shows all of the candidates that have at least one reference that has not been received. Again, this will all make sense later because I'm actually typing and doing this at the same time, which is not ideal because I can't think through as I'm talking through it. So with that, I'm going to pause, start a new video.